Release your fears and you will find the truth you always seek has always been inside. Your heart is waiting to be your guide if you just let it go. Release the past and you will see the path is open, you're already free. The only one who can create your destiny is you. You gotta learn to let it flow. Release, 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 and let it go. Breathe deep, and let it flow. Surrender to the truth you seek. Your heart already knows what the way to go. We've all been taught the world to see as I instead of we. Accepting what we're told because they tell us so, but it never worked for you or me. I think it's time to look inside. Look in the mirror, look into your eyes. Tell me what you see. What are the secrets that you keep? What do you hide when nobody's looking? Release, 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 and let it go. Breathe deep, and let it flow. Surrender to the truth you seek, 'cause your heart, it already knows. Release, 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 and let it go. Breathe deep, and let it flow. Surrender to the truth you seek, 'cause your heart, it already knows. Release, 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 and let it go. Breathe deep, and let it flow. Surrender to the truth you seek, 'cause your heart already Release your fears and you will find the truth you always seek has always been inside. Your heart is waiting to be your guide if you just let it go. Release the past and you will see the path is open, you're already free. The only one who can create your destiny is you. You gotta let it flow. Release, 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 and let it go. Breathe deep, breathe deep, breathe deep, and let it flow. Surrender to the truth you seek. Your heart already knows. Good evening, everybody. How you doing? Welcome to the SoulJourn. My name is Heshima Moja, and you're tuned in to Studio 2622. And the SoulJourn, for those who don't know, is a journey that I help guide you on through sound, directing right back to ourselves, because at the end of the day, it's all about the inner journey. It's all about the journey of the soul, which is why I call this show the SoulJourn. I'm so excited to be back with you again this week. Last week was such an exhilarating show with my friend Jasmine Clemente, and this week promises to be as exhilarating with my brother Iyaba Ibo Mandingo, who is an amazing visual artist, and you can see him on the screen now. I've asked him to stay on the screen and work while we get ready for him. But he's also an amazing writer, poet, playwright, actor, educator. And so today, just a little bit later, Iyaba and I are going to be talking about his journey or becoming Iyaba, and then also about the role and the responsibility of artists and of the arts in our time. Not just in pandemic, but in modern times, right? And so we'll be talking, Iyaba will be sharing his views with me, his ideas, his philosophy, and him and I are very much aligned as Caribbean brothers. So I wanted to just talk a little bit my own self for a couple of minutes about the idea of the arts. So historically, in the cultural context that I come from and that Iyaba comes from, and people from throughout the African continent or the African diasporas, the multiple African diasporas, because there are multiple diasporas. Some scholars, some intellectuals, academics like to talk about the diaspora as if it's an exclusive thing, but there are multiple diasporas. So in that cultural context, historically, there is no division between the sacred and the secular. Whereas in Enlightenment and post-Enlightenment societies in Europe, the idea shifted from the we to the I. The Enlightenment became about individual attainment, stepping away from the pre-Enlightenment society, which was the church in Europe, and the church dictated the social mores and the morals and all of that. So there became this very staunch line between the sacred and the secular as the church tried to hold on to control in Europe, and as the Enlightenment began to move the idea of individual achievement forward. Whereas in African diasporic cultures, there's always been this union of the sacred and the secular, not a very clear line of demarcation. What am I talking about? Well, for people who live in maybe a Judeo-Christian context, there is an idea that you go to a place of worship on a particular day of the week and you carry out your religious obligation. Whereas in African diasporic societies, every act is traditionally a spiritual act. You get up in the morning and you're engaged with the divine, whatever idea that is, because there are multiple ideas. And so that's also important, maybe something that we'll talk about with Iyaba, but just the idea that there is not a homogenous African culture, nor is there a homogenous African diaspora. We have over 1,500 different spiritual systems, many language groupings, so cultural and ethnic expression throughout the African continent and the multiple African diasporas is very different. And the expressions, artistically, culturally, creatively, spiritually, are very different. So we're going to be talking today just about the idea of what are some of the roles of the artist in light of understanding that everything is somehow connected to the divine within cultural expressions throughout the African continent and the multiple diasporas. What is the role of the artist traditionally, and how does that role carry forward into our modern times? Right? So this is very important. There's a quote I'd like to share with you. And that quote comes from, excuse me as I take my bass off. There is a quote that comes from a book by a wonderful artist, educator from Mali, Yaya Diallo. And it's this book which some people may have seen. It's called The Healing Drum, African Wisdom Teachings. And it comes from his particular experience growing up in Mali as a Fienso person. But in the book, there's a quote that's always stood out to me. And it says this: when you're playing music, you need to be conscious of how you are affecting people. I've met many musicians in North America who only want to make a hit record, regardless of the value of the music on a deeper level. They're not aware of the subtle effects of music on human well-being. But musicians should be aware of their role. They can build or destroy. So, without getting too much into the particulars of the music industry, in which I've worked in and partaken in many different genres. For those who don't know, my primary background is that of a jazz and folkloric musician and a composer. But working as a musician, I've worked with quite a few popular music or contemporary music artists in the music industry. And so I've had that experience as well. So without getting too much into that, focusing on the idea of understanding the effect of music. When I'm playing my bass, or when I'm playing the piano, or if I'm composing something, if I'm working in that context, then, yes, beautiful piece. Yes, that's, move it back over, brother. Yeah, beautiful. Oh, man. What an amazing piece. It's from a new series he's working on. I've been watching him work. So when we think about playing our music, not only for the musician, but for the visual artist, for the photographer, for the dancer, for anyone who expresses and shares energy with a public, with an audience, in a performance setting or in a communal setting, it's not just what we play, but it's how we play. And it's with the intention that we play. And so thinking about the idea that for the musician, for the painter, for the artist, there is also an imperative to live a particular type of lifestyle, because we understand that we are vessels and we're transmitting energy. Painters transmit color and shape, which is energy. Dancers transmit energy. Musicians transmit energy. Photographers, actors, right? And so what I'm going to do before I introduce Iyaba is play a short piece of mine from a new work that I'm actually developing called The Healing Suite. So I'm going to play this piece for you real briefly, and then I'm going to bring Brother Iyaba into the conversation. This is a piece called Sanar, which means in Spanish, to heal, right? And so this piece I wrote with the intention of healing. Sonata. So I just played the melody and the chord changes for you all. I didn't play the solo because I'm not a piano player. For those who know me, I like to joke about the fact that I'm a composer, but I'm not a piano player. So I write things for real piano players to actually play and interpret what I write. So I'd like to now introduce the SoulJourn audience and the Studio 2622 audience to a friend, a brother, artistic colleague, spiritual comrade, amazing artist, playwright, poet, and so much more. Iyaba Ibo Mandingo. Welcome to the SoulJourn, brother.
Hey, brother, how are you, man? That was lovely. I love Sana. I love Sana.
Thanks, brother.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me, man, and thank you for 2622 for having me as well, man. It's great being with you guys, and I love the vibe.
Man, yes. So I specifically asked you to continue to work while we were interviewing, but also while I'm playing, because I think that people, brother Iyaba, don't necessarily always see the integration of multiple disciplines. They tend to think of art as very separate.
Yes.
And not only separate from each discipline or genre, but also separate from other facets of daily life. And so, as I've been kind of alluding to, the idea that in our cultural contexts, the African continent or the multiple African diasporas, art is not a separate thing. In fact, in West Africa, there's really no word for art in many of the West African languages.
Sure isn't.
There's no word. And my brothers from Senegal hit me to that a long time ago. They said, we don't have a word for art.
No. You have a profession that you are a blacksmith, you are a carver, you are a painter, you are a weaver, and you know already what that makes you.
Right.
You know, you specialize, and just by the specializing, you know already that you're a part of this thing. And a lot of times, that's why you don't see signatures, because they have marks that go with their trade, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, in fact, on my shakuhachi, my Japanese flute, there's no name. There's only a mark from the person who crafted that shakuhachi over 100 years ago.
Wow.
And so, yes, on the drum, there's no, nobody says who made that drum. People know by the mark.
Yeah.
Right. On my ceremonial drums. So Iyaba, tell us a little bit, just real briefly about your journey, man. How did I call it becoming Iyaba, but how did you kind of grow into being who you are?
Wow, brother. I mean, and I'm not just doing this because you like you said, you see me working on this for a while now, for the last couple of weeks, and mommy actually had to call me and remind me that it's been about 8 years since my grandfather, my baba, passed, and he was a tailor, master tailor. My grandmother was a seamstress, a master seamstress, and this is where I spent all of my childhood until we moved to America at about 11, almost 12 years old. Wow. And so being with them, two people who I found out later in life that were artists who had to become artisans to make a living, it was art. So whenever I get that place where I'm missing them, or they come, they sort of, I guess the Western word for it, I dream them. It feels more like I feel them. Then I go back to the cloth and the textiles and the scissors and the iron and the stuff you guys saw me doing in the cutting table, and I really count them. And for me, it's being a visual artist and understanding. A couple years ago, the Babalawo told me that I would be going back to working with textiles, and I knew that he meant that I would be going Sankofa. I would be going back to get it. I would be going back to my roots. And so for me, that's really the story, in a really long story short kind of way of how I started this journey. Years and years ago, I was in a jail in Iowa for getting my white girlfriend pregnant, and we have a 31-year-old son now. And I remember praying to Jesus like nobody's business in that cell. And a little boy said, "Why don't you talk to your grandmother? She you know where she is, and you and her are cool." and I did, and here I am instead of being maybe 6 years out of jail because I was looking at 25 years imprisonment. So that was the beginning. I remember coming out of that and wondering, wow, how come I got in touch with my grandmother and to this higher power when I used my grandmother, and years later I discovered Ifa, and here I am. My grandmother was this woman who believed, as much as she was a Methodist, she went to the Obya man just as often. And in the Caribbean, Obya is another form of Ifa, is another form of Udon, is another form of Santeria. So when I discovered Ifa years later, the click was just easy for me, and I changed my name sort of as an ode to that. Right after college, from Kenny Afro George de Cruz, which is again talking about our heritage and the connections that we have. My father's from South America, and it just there was a sense of empowerment that came from that, and so here I am now, this cat who is really going backwards to move forwards, because all of it is already back there. It's all written down. It's a remembering and a wanting and a searching for me. Yeah.
When I first met you, you told that story in the one-man play, in the play that you were doing, which is for people just to understand the backstory. We're mutually connected through a brother that Iyaba went to undergrad with, Daryl Moss.
Yes.
Another amazing poet, writer, activist, scholar. And Daryl said, "Oh, you're going to be up in Massachusetts, man. Come to this play." And I went to the play where you essentially tell your life story. You wrote this play.
Yes.
You start in the Caribbean, and when you got to the part in the play where you talk about the fact that you were arrested for simply being with a white woman,
yes,
in the Midwest in college, then I think I choked about 100 times in that story.
Yeah, brother. Yeah.
But during this whole thing, you're creating. I mean, you're not only telling your story, but you're painting your story. For those who haven't had a chance to see the play, we'll talk about maybe that in a little bit. But you're painting your story as well, and so I think that it's a good way to segue into our topic, which is, we're living in a time where people have lots of access to lots of different kinds of art and music.
Mm-hmm.
The new generation has their own music. Every generation has their own musical expression. And I swore to myself as a young man that when I got older, I would never be that guy who would say, "Oh my God, you young
just
people."
like my parents.
Right. But at least, even for you and I, who both have the opportunity to work with young people in different contexts, getting young people or getting people in general to understand really what the role and the responsibility of the artist is in a modern society, because we can romanticize, and I think that there's a certain amount of that romanticizing that happens when we talk about Africa or the African diaspora and the griot or the healer, the shaman, the jele, any of those amalgamations, the sangoma, any of those types of manifestations of the artist. But there is a historical root and context to talk about how culturally we look at the artistic practitioner and what they can do in society and what their role is in terms of maintaining stories, in terms of recording the stories visually and audio, vibrationally. So talk a little bit about your idea, your philosophy about what the role of the artist is in this modern context. How do we bring that potency artistically into the modern context when a lot of us are bombarded every day with very commercial elements and some very deliberate and sometimes insidious crafting of imagery to get us to believe that it's just music, it's
Mm-hmm.
just entertainment, it's just this. If you could talk
Just
about that a little bit.
well, for me, the strange thing is the role of the artist, even when the artist didn't take a very forward action, has always been to tell the truth about the times. Because being a historian, the Renaissance or any time period in history, we know if you want to see what the period was really like, you check the art. You could see the religious restrictions and all the pressures that the artists went under. You hear about popes, manhandling some of these famous painters that are gods now, and how they made them do what they want, or how the Medici family, how they dealt with artists and these kind of things. And you realize that the artists, even when they were being oppressed or controlled, they would still sneak in the truth about what was going on. So that sometimes it was very subversive. And I think now in our time we can be a lot more blatant, and not just our time, in the '60s as well. It was an opportunity to do that, and I think you're absolutely right. What's happened is art has become this commercial thing where now in the art world, the dealers are more famous than the artists whose work they own. You know dealers' names faster than you know artists' names, and I think what's happened is the artist has lost that ancient sort of foreboding, or the thing that came with your profession, which was you are the voice, you are the town crier, you are that person that goes to
Right.
the top of the tower and yells what's going on, and the people count on you in spite of everything, whether it's hard or not, to be that true voice that they can, whether the politician is telling them this or that, the preacher is telling them this or that, they know the artist is always going to tell them the truth. It's always going to be is going to take pride in attacking any kind of nonsense or just direct lies that people are being trained to. So I think a lot of times artists, especially in the music world, because that's pushed at us so hard, we see
Sure.
we see this whole idea of just playing to the norm. So nobody goes outside the stream. Nobody swims up back, against the current. Nobody does anything, and of course you get another generation of artists that come out numb, because all they've heard is all you got to do is just sample somebody's stuff. All you got to do is just and that goes right across all of the different diasporas, and
Sure.
also the different disciplines when it comes to how in Africa right now one of the biggest issues is plagiarism, that people just blatantly taking each other's things and not even understanding the context. So for me, the artist is about going back to not only that voice, but also remembering that the very first form of communication is art. Those cave paintings and drawings. These are the way these were universal things. When somebody from another ethnic group or tribe wandered into that cave and they saw a deer, they knew that those were deer. They didn't need anybody to tell them that maybe they weren't the same deer as their deer, but they knew what that meant. They knew that these people probably were saying that these animals exist here. And when you're hunter gatherers, I mean, that's pertinent information to be able to see that and be able to have that sort of universal language. So to get that and understand that we are those people and realize that in these times, it's really important to understand that in 100 years and 200 years, what this new century is will fall on Heshima Moja, Iyaba Ibo Mandingo, and our the like. If it's madness, then they'll say that we were a waste of time. If it's brilliant, and if there were things that if they saw a lot of shedding of the old ideas and the old approaches, and people really being vanguards, then we get that. And when you go back to the 20th century, the beginning 100 years ago, Salvador Dali and all these kind of people were starting to come to be. And these were people. Jelly Roll Johnson was inventing jazz, and Louis Armstrong was on the planet. You know what I'm saying? So these are the kind of things that when you hear these things, you understand if you're an artist and you're a true artist. And by true artist, I mean somebody that really understands the gift and the responsibility of the gift. Because there are a lot of talented people out there who just think that it's about making money or about making people clap, and not understanding that it's time to tap back into the original role of the artist, which is the voice of the community, and also the inspiration of the community, and also the shaman of the community.
Mm-hmm.
Your job is to have people believe in magic. If it's raining all the time and you paint a sunny day, and you paint it with enough feeling, a person can look at that and remember a sunny day and the feeling of a sun on their skin, and that's an artist's job. I mean, you hear us, you're down, and you hear a song that brings you back up, or you have somebody come up to you and tell you that your poem that you wrote for you just saved them from killing themselves. You know, these type of things, it can't be something that you take for granted. You have to really understand that this is a very, very important role in creation. I mean, I can't think of an epoch or time in history when an artist wasn't important. Whether there were times in history when people realized it at that time that the artist present time, and they were revered as such, and sometimes they're even deified. But now the artist is seen as the opposite. You know, we are. You know, they think that we can just be, they can computerize us, and it's just an algorithm. Oh, I can do that. Oh, I can make that song. I just push a couple of buttons. Oh, I can do that painting. I'll just push a couple of buttons.
And I
And
think
there's no gut.
absolutely. And I think also to contextualize this for the people who might be watching who don't consider themselves, in quotes, an artist,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because they believe, well, I have a day job. I'm not really an artist. I'm an
Mm-hmm.
amateur. I think what people forget quite often is that art takes on, in non-Western societies in particular,
Mm-hmm.
like if we think about in the modern context why hair might be such an important thing in the Black community, right? Why is
Mm-hmm.
hair so hotly debated? Why is hair talked about? And if we look at many of the cultures throughout the African continent and throughout the multiple African diasporas, and what role hair played in terms of liberation, right?
Yes.
And you juxtapose that against, for instance, the Judeo-Christian idea, and this is not a judgment of Christianity for those watching. This is just a historical contextualization, where scriptures and things were used to tell people why it was a sin to plait their hair, which for those who don't know what plaiting is braiding, putting
Mm-hmm.
things in the hair. But here in the North American context, one of the things that was brought from the African continent was the ability to create maps and messages in the hairstyles.
Yes. 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 Yes.
And so if it was considered a sin to braid your hair a particular way, but in that hair braiding, there was a message, there was a map to freedom, right? And this came
Mm-hmm.
from many of the cultures within the African continent.
Absolute.
South
Absolute.
Africa,
It was a way. It was a way of not only culturally, to tell a Mendi versus a Yoruba because of the way the women wear their hair or the men wear their hair, but it was also inside of the Yoruba. A boy would wear his hair a different way than an adolescent boy would wear his hair a different way than a teenager who's now approaching manhood, than an elder who's already lived their life. All of these, and you could look at a person and see those distinctions. And a lot of times I believe that we have those sort of hidden memories, buried memories that are very DNA, that you do a thing the way a man wears his beard and never realizes, well, why do I always cut my beard this kind of way? Because it's in you to not even realize that this is how your people move yourself. I remember taking off my mustache because I lost my sister 2 years ago to cancer, and this was an ode to her.
yep,
And the funny thing is, again, I raised in a Judeo-Christian culture, and the Nazarene code, a lot of Rastas, that's what they deal with. Number 6 in the Bible, and it talks about when you come upon a dead, should somebody close to you pass, you should cut your hair. And my sister asked me not to do that when she knows she was dying. So this was sort of our compromise. And the minute I
yes,
cut this off, I know already, being born in Antigua and in the Caribbean, I'm from the Akan people on what is now called Ghana, that coast,
right,
and I have a lot of Akan friends, and this is how they wear their face.
right.
And to go with them and to sit there and not have any of them come up and say you're wearing it, just have them look at me and do that kind of that recognition smile you get, and then
Yeah, yeah.
to have like that epiphany a few hours later or a day or two later when you realize, okay, none of these men wear a mustache.
Right.
and where they're here, and to feel this sort of comfortableness is is amazing to me, and it makes you want to connect and understand it. And that to me is, especially when it's talking about art, so
Right.
much of that is what it is for us. You know, another
Right.
Ghanaian brother, I met Sammy Bento years ago and watched him putting African mask in his paintings instead of the people's faces, and
Right.
being fascinated by that, and then asking him, talk to me about abstraction. I've never understood. And he said, you should go look into African art. We were abstracting the human form long before anybody on the earth did. And I knew
Right.
African sculptures, but I'd never thought to myself, yeah. And then understood this, like you said, art is in everything for us. So a piece of sculpture, it's embedded with juju, which is what we would call, what's the Western word for that, spirit.
But yeah, yeah.
It's
There's
embedded with it.
energy.
So the artist in that process, he becomes that shaman. And you, I've watched Picasso do that. I just put up a picture online of Matisse in the bed with the
Yeah, I
long
saw.
stick.
Yeah.
That's shamanism at that moment.
He's
This is
he's
this is
dying. He's
yeah.
dying, and he's
This
using
is
a
I
stick
cannot. This
to
is
draw.
I have to get this out of me. And what was he making? He was taking the human face and simplifying it all the way down. There's an African mask that looks just like that face he was making. And Matisse lets you know that he studied it because of something else he said. He understood the cross pollination of things. There is nothing new under the sun. The idea is to find the thing and to give me your take on the thing,
Right.
and to have the thing come from inside of you instead of trying to have it only be from what you experienced. You know what I'm saying? So
And
that
so,
you do get to the point as an artist where people go, Heshima, you sound like you now.
yeah, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And that's the greatest compliment an artist can have is when somebody tells
Great.
me I look with my work look like me.
Right.
That means you've reached a place where your influencers aren't taking the front anymore.
I read a quote when I was prepping for this show where Virginia Woolf said, "If you don't tell the truth about yourself, you can't tell it about other people."
That's
And
and when you're
so
creative, if you're afraid of the truth, you got to quit your job.
you got to
You
quit your
can get
job.
another job.
And so
If you are
and so to
creative
context
person and you're afraid of the truth, forget it.
forget it. And so to
Get another job.
contextualize this in to contextualize this and keep it in line with the theme that we're talking about, which is the role of the artist and the responsibility of the arts in
Mm-hmm.
modern times. I think that some of the things I'm hearing from you are one, the importance of understanding that no matter how modern we get, the importance, and although it seems like a cliche for so many people, but the importance of looking back and understanding what elements we're bringing forward instinctually, right?
Mm-hmm.
Cultural memory, the things we bring with us that we don't even realize are in us until they
Mm-hmm.
start to come out. I
Mm-hmm.
always think of, for instance, because my grandmother sewed as well.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandmother used to make quilts. But I think about the African American tradition where women would quilt.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the slave master or the boss thought that that was just some women getting together to make a quilt, but they were embedding stories because they knew I'm not going to be on this planet forever. I
Exactly.
have to pass these stories on. So what I'm hearing from you as well is the importance of the artist understanding their responsibility to comment objectively and truthfully on the time that they're living in.
Yes.
Nina Simone said it all the time. It's my job as an artist to comment on what's happening in the world. And I tend to
Absolutely.
divide artists into three categories. There's artists who are commentators. There are artists who are they're visionaries, meaning that they realize they're living in a particular time, but they also see a vision of a new future.
Mm-hmm.
Like a James Baldwin, who is our kind
Yes.
of like
Or
our
Sun Ra.
or
Or
Sun
Sun
Ra,
Ra. Yeah.
right? Or a Bob Marley, who's
Yes.
envisioning, sharing a vision of a new future,
Yes.
or a John Coltrane, who's
Absolutely.
envisioning a new
Absolutely.
future and projecting that out into the world, almost like opening an energetic doorway, a portal,
Mm-hmm.
so that people can walk through it. And so, you know, the fact is that for so many, you know, I don't blame a lot of young artists, because a lot of young artists simply have not been given the instruction. They haven't had the mentorship.
Amen.
Whereas maybe us being a little bit older, you know, I came up as a jazz musician in a time where, and my first instrument was the drum, and coming up in a time when I wasn't allowed to play the drum until my teacher said, "You're ready."
Yes.
Not ready to play technically, because technically, you know, a monkey can mimic the rhythms, but you're not ready here. You're not ready here. You don't understand what your responsibility is and what your role is. And Baba Yaya Diallo, in the quote that I read at the beginning of the show, he said, musicians need to understand that they can build or destroy.
That's it.
With their work, based upon what they're transmitting. So not only the aspiration to become technically gifted, but to develop a life so that as the art is channeling through you, it's, you know, it's not water going through a dirty pipe. We don't want that.
Yes, well said. Well said.
We don't want to poison the people, right? We want to share an energy with them. And it doesn't mean that we're perfect, but it means that we should be aspiring to build our lives outside of art. One of my mentors, Avery Sharp, always said, don't you dare ever let me hear you use that ridiculous excuse that you live a messed up life because you're an artist. If you live a messed up life, it's just because you're a messed up person, not because you're an artist. Art has nothing to do. The art has nothing to do with you being a messed up person.
Yes, I agree.
And so I have to kind of wrap up our interview now, and I want you to continue to work as I wrap up the show, because I got a couple more things to do. But before we go, Iyaba, just let people know where they can find you, some of the things you're working on now, where they can find you online, and view your art, purchase your art, purchase his art.
There it is. Brother, thank you for having me, man. There it is. That's the book. That's the book. Very good. Thank you, heart. Thank you. Bless your heart. Thank you guys for having me, man. It was a wonderful little chop. It was wonderful chopping it up with you, brother.
Yes.
You said to them, what I'm doing now with the work. My grandfather never taught me to sew. It was one of these things where he recognized that I had an ability, and he would say things like, "Boy, you're paying attention?" And I would see him looking over to watch me. And now the things that I'm doing, like the idea of creating patterns and knowing how to cut cloth, is from watching and paying attention. And that's where it's from. And that's a trip, you know. But I just came upstairs. This is like the second floor of the gallery. A lot of work. You guys could reach me on www.iyabaarts.com. And the gallery is going to be open soon. Everything in here is for sale. Let me show you guys a little bit of this stuff and get out the way real quick. Let's see.
Yes,
Totem poles. These are the new pieces that Heshima was telling you guys about over here. These are all textile pieces.
Man, I love those pieces. That whole series.
They call Dihuku, which is a Zimbabwe word for head wraps, and it's really celebrating just the way African women can just turn fabric into crowns. Yeah, really, really love these pieces. Yeah, but I mean, so much here to see. You guys definitely got to come and see me as soon as this thing clears. We are definitely inviting everybody and their mother to come up and see us. One of the older pieces that I wanted you guys to see. This is from a Juju series. This is a pretty tall piece. You see me walking by our statues here from the Circle of Mothers. That's Spirit Mother back there.
Yeah, the first time I went to your house, man. Oh, I remember
you guys definitely
stood around.
Yeah, it's awesome in here. I love it. I say it every day. I walk through and I'm like, wow, I can't believe I live in a gallery museum.
This is his house, everybody. This is where he lives. This is not a separate art gallery. This is his house.
So you
You
guys,
walk in and there's juju everywhere, man. There's juju
as soon as this is
everywhere.
done, and Heshima and I are going to be doing a lot of music here. So you guys make sure you guys stay tuned to both of us, man. I can be reached. Find me on Facebook, on Instagram, on all the other social media portholes. Iyaba Ibo Mandingo or Iyaba Arts, man. Brother, thank you for having me. I'm gonna go back down and continue to paint and listen to that music you were playing. It was beautiful. It was wonderful being on, man. To your audience, you guys enjoy. Good brother, love him plenty. A lot of magical stuff coming from both of us. And you guys stay tuned, man. Have a blessed day. Remember, man, all of this is just a phase, man. Stay low, keep your immune system strong, and walk through this better. Peace.
Yeah, man.
Yes, brother. Yes, brother.
Man. Wow. So thank you so much, Iyaba, for being on. And he's going to continue to paint while we continue to work. So once again, make sure you check him out at iyabaarts.com. And we'll post all of those in the 2622 sites as well. So I want to just move back into the idea of meditation. And we talked about art and how art can transform lives. Artists can transform lives in a positive way or a negative way for the public who views and partakes of their art, whatever medium it might be. In that spirit, you know, I read that quote by Virginia Woolf: if you don't tell the truth about yourself, you cannot tell it about other people. Oftentimes in our society, we're very quick to tell everybody about themselves because it's a way to avoid dealing with us. And no pun intended, but we wear the mask. We wear the masks. And I want you to take a moment and to think about the mask you wear. What's one of those things that you hide from the world? I sang about it in my song Release, which I sang at the beginning of the show. What's one of those things that you need to unmask about yourself in order to be more truthful? Because whether you're a painter, a photographer, a dancer, a musician, whether you're a chef, whether you're a martial artist, whether you own a mechanic shop, whether you're a CEO of a company, a doctor, a lawyer, it doesn't matter. We're all creators. We've all been created with the purpose of continuing creation, whether that's giving life through being a healer, or whether that's helping people in the courtroom as a lawyer or a judge, or being a police officer or a fireman or a rescue worker. Shout out to all of our essential workers who are putting their lives on the line still in the hospitals, our nurses, our doctors. I'm going to do something. I'm going to do a meditation from a different space now. The meditation I'm going to do is using the drum. And I wanted to use the drum just to lead a guided meditation for a couple of moments before we close the show. You see, this is the juju that Iyaba was talking about. So I'm just setting up a separate stand, if you will. And, oh my goodness. So, there we go. The drum, the hypnotic power of the drum. In African diasporic cultures, traditionally, when a person was sick, whether it was the middle of the night or the middle of the day, they would call the drummer, because the drummers and the musicians had a esoteric knowledge of herbs and all of the healing properties of the music. So what I'd like you to do is I'm going to ask you to begin to breathe with me. Breathe with me. And I want you to meditate for a moment on the idea of something you want to remove from your life, a mask you need to get rid of, something that you want to release that would allow you to live a more truthful life, your own truth. Maybe there's a dream you have, something that you've been wanting to do, something you want to accomplish and you've been hiding from it. Begin to breathe with me. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight to the SoulJourn. I want to thank my guest, Iyaba Ibo Mandingo, Thank you so much, brother, for being with us. Thank you for sharing your art with the world and your wisdom and your energy. Thank you to Studio 2622 and everybody who makes this happen each and every week. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to all of you for tuning in. I want to remind you that if you have questions, please feel free to forward those to Studio 2622. You can include them in any of the social media links, and the questions will be forwarded to me. Or if the question is for Iyaba, I can certainly forward the questions to him, and he'll answer them, and you will get your answer. Also, shameless plug for myself, I would love for you all to go over to Amazon or iTunes or Google and check out my album, The Awakening, an album written for the purpose. Thank you so much for putting that cover up there. An album written for the purpose of addressing the need to constantly elevate our consciousness, the idea of awakening, the idea of the fact that sometimes we're all sleeping. And so music has the power to awaken our consciousness. And with my musicians and my compositions, hopefully I've accomplished that. And of course, new music coming this year. Please head on over to Studio 2622, as well as their Patreon page, if you'd like to support programming on Studio 2622. Until next week, thank you so much. Be kind to yourselves and do something each day that leads you closer to your highest purpose, because each and every one of us has a gift that the world needs to experience. Each of us is here to contribute something. So I encourage you to continue on that journey, the soul journey. See you next week.